Hello, and welcome to Scaryside. The entity. I can't remember my exact age, maybe around 7 or 8. I can recall my family and I moving into a new house. It took a little while for us to get settled into the new place. It was a lot bigger than our previous home, which was only a 2-bedroom apartment. It was nice, but something about it gave me the creeps. There was lots of extra space to explore, and I had a bigger bedroom, which was great. Or so I thought at the time. A few months had passed, and things went on as usual. That is until I began having nightmares. At first, they happened every once in a while. I remember brushing it off at the time because I believed nothing bad could come out of it. Then it began happening more and more frequently as time went on. So much so that I dreaded going to bed at night. Bedtime became a nightly battle with my parents, and I'm sure it was driving them up the wall that I had become so difficult. My mistake was not telling them about it. They merely thought I was going through a rebellious stage. That wasn't it. I became so paranoid that when the evening hours would set in, I couldn't handle it if I wasn't near some sort of light. Going to sleep every night was awful for me during this time of my life. One time specifically, I remember not even knowing I was in a nightmare. As far as I knew, I was in the living room watching TV with my father when he said it was time to wrap things up and head to bed. I begged him to stay up a little longer because just the thought of being in my bedroom at night terrified me. I soon realized that my pleas were to no avail, as my father gathered my things and began walking me down the long, dark hallway. It felt like pure doom was waiting for me in the darkness. As we approached the door to my bedroom, I couldn't help but to stand there, petrified, not knowing whether or not something could be potentially in there lurking around. The idea of that sent a bolt of fear down my spine. In that moment, I let out a loud scream as I watched a long, black, shadowy limb grab me by the arm, pulling me violently into the darkness. I immediately sat up in my bed in a cold sweat, heart racing, screaming and crying, realizing that it had all just been a bad dream. My mother racing to my bedside to see what was wrong and comforting me. During these kinds of episodes, her attempt at comforting me did not ease my fear. It felt too real this time. Unfortunately, these nightmares continued over the next 2 years. Fast forward a bit, and the conversation about moving again was brought up. I remember feeling excited about getting out of the house we were currently in, thinking maybe it's the house that's causing these horrible nightmares. Within a few weeks, we found a new house, and we moved yet again. The first day at the new house, I thought to myself, this house seems cheery. It definitely has a much more pleasant vibe to it. And for the first several months, the nightmares seemed to let up. I was sleeping normally again. There was a lot less stress at bedtime, which seemed to make my parents a bit more relaxed. I still hadn't opened up to them completely as to what had been going on with me, although my mother seemed to have an idea. Either way, life felt easy again. I was a lot happier. I didn't feel like a dark cloud was hovering over me all the time anymore. I thought I would never have to deal with that stuff again. Things were going great until it happened. This one remains etched into my memory like no other. It was a normal night. I went to bed. While I was lying there, I noticed a red light which began to dimly light up my dark bedroom. I slowly turned over to see where the source of the light was coming from. My door was slightly cracked, and it seemed to be coming from the hallway. That's when I saw it. A tall, black, smoky-edged entity with a wide-fanged smile and glowing white eyes standing at the foot of my bed. I froze in absolute terror. I saw its long arms and claw-like fingers hanging beside its massive body. Thinking at any moment, this thing was going to shred me to pieces. I slowly sat up, not wanting to provoke it by making any sudden movements, and I just stared back at it in utter horror. It felt like an eternity. I then noticed it slowly tilt its head to the side. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I screamed at the top of my lungs and pointed at it. My mind became clouded with pure fear. I could do nothing but point at it, stare, and scream. When I saw my mother the next morning, the first thing she said was, "How are you feeling today, honey?" I hadn't remembered any of it and had no idea what she was talking about. My mother, looking at me with confusion, said, "You don't remember what happened?" I told her no and began asking her questions. She seemed hesitant at first to tell me anything, but I wouldn't drop it, and she finally caved. She began by saying she had never witnessed anything like it in her life and was frightened beyond belief. It was the middle of the night, and she was asleep in her bed when all of a sudden she was startled out of her mind to the sound of blood-curdling screaming and crying. She rushed into my room to find me sitting upright in my bed, eyes wide open and filled with tears, and pointing into the doorway. When she tried to comfort me and ask me what was wrong, I wouldn't answer her. There was no consoling me. She didn't know what to do except keep her arms wrapped tightly around me. She then said that after a few minutes of trying to calm me down, I abruptly fell limp. My arm dropped from where it was, and my frightened eyes became heavy. I then softly told her I had a bad dream before collapsing peacefully back into my pillow and sleeping as though nothing had even happened. At that moment is when I started to remember the horrific night I had. It all came rushing back to me. These nightmares, which eventually evolved into night terrors, went on for a few more torturous years. I never really talked much about it, but my mother helped me through those times as best she could. They eventually stopped. I'm a lot older now, and very thankful these horrible visions came to an end, completely. Those years were rough. Seeing that dark entity in my room, time and time again, utterly traumatized me. For many years, I couldn't stand going into dimly lit or pitch black areas. I always had to have a nightlight well into my teenage years. Luckily, I have grown out of that, and those times are far behind me. But I just want to know why it was the same nightmare, the same entity that stared at me. Why it all started after moving to that one house. What caused this? It felt so real. Was something actually visiting me? I will always wonder. If anyone has ever experienced something like this before, we would love to hear about it. Please comment or email us at scarysidetales@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the story.